The New York Rangers are struggling to score goals as of late, but they're still getting some great goaltending, and they are in contention in the Metropolitan Division. John Chick of Locked On New York Rangers joins us to discuss the Rangers situation. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could join us today, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On New York Rangers, John Chick. And John, a big win for the Rangers out on the West Coast, but it wasn't easy against the Sharks. Almost blew that one. What was your key takeaway from that game?
Well, honestly, I love the Rangers game up until about the final minute 07 there because, Adam Fox got the empty netter. You're up 2-0, and you should be just about home free. Never say never. That's enough time to score 2 goals, but it really shouldn't happen. And the Sharks score one with 15 seconds left, and Igor with a great save with 4 seconds left to avoid disaster there. But up until that, I thought the Rangers played great. I know it's easy to kind of scoff and say, oh, it's just the Sharks, congratulations. But, the Sharks started the season 0-5. They've basically been about a 500 team since then. They had won 3 out of 4 going in. Of course, they had home ice advantage as well. And, I said, and Gerard Gallant mentioned this after the game, it might be the Rangers' best win since opening night when they beat Tampa because it was such a grinded out kind of a game. A lot of action, very high paced. And, it's easy to look at a game like Detroit, and the Rangers beat them 8-2 and had that great third period. And you might think that's, maybe one of the best wins. But, this is a dogfight. The Sharks were in this game. They played really hard. The Rangers got great goaltending. They were skating really hard, very good skating the entire night. Created a bunch of scoring opportunities, just could not finish until Julien Gauthier kind of played the role of unlikely hero late in the third period, giving them a 1-0 lead. So overall, I thought it was a great game. If you can just erase that final minute there where, if you're a Ranger fan, you're probably losing your mind watching that. I know I was. But yeah, besides that, man, 59 minutes of really solid hockey. And they got 2 more games on this road trip. And you just hope that they can get a couple more wins before the little Thanksgiving break here.
Yeah. You mentioned that goal scoring is a little bit of a struggle lately. One player who has been slumping, at least as far as putting the puck in the net over the last few games, Artemi Panarin. That's unusual. What's going on with Panarin right now?
Yeah, I think with Panarin, and this can be the case for a couple of different guys on this team, but he's certainly one of them. There's times where players on this team, and I've talked about it on my show, they can be selfless to a fault where, everybody wants to make that extra pass and everyone wants to set up their buddy. Panarin especially, whenever the Rangers have a power play, he's always looking to hit that cross-ice pass to Mika Zibanejad. And Gil, I know we talked about this when we did our Ranger Islander crossover not too long ago.
Yeah.
And, on one hand, Panarin passing to Mika on the power play and setting up a one-timer, that's good, right? That you take your chances with that anytime. By that same token, though, I'd like to see Panarin pull the trigger a little bit more often on the power play. He can shoot it himself. And, while we're on the subject of the power play, I wouldn't mind seeing Adam Fox take a couple more shots at the net. It feels like on the power play right now, and they have been good on the power play, but it feels like they're a little too comfortable just going to that Mika one-timer. They've got so many weapons on that top power play unit. Use it, spread the wealth a little bit and try some different things. And, as for Panarin, I think he's just got to shoot a little bit more often. I don't think he's played poorly or anything like that. He looked good in the game last night. Just a mini slump. I don't think it's anything to be too concerned of long-term as far as, him scoring. He just got to shoot a little bit more.
One player who is definitely not slumping after a little bit of a slow start is Igor Shesterkin. He is rounding back into form, and right now he has all 9 of the Rangers' victories under his belt. Tell me what the difference is between Shesterkin maybe the first couple of weeks of the season and what we've seen recently.
Yeah, he's really on a roll these past 3 games. I talked about that on the show that I'm going to be releasing on Monday. He's really just kind of picked it up. I don't know. There were times earlier this season where I think his defense kind of failed him a little bit. There were a couple instances where maybe he left in something of a soft goal. But to me, more than anything, whatever you want to call it, a slow start or whatever, it's just kind of a reminder that Igor Shesterkin actually is human. And I talk about this in the most recent episode as well. Every goalie on this planet, sooner or later, you're going to go through a rough patch of some kind, one time or another. Igor maybe went through a little bit of one, and I said this as well on my show, but Igor's rough patches aren't even that rough. It's just kind of like, he's just kind of average, And these last 3 games, I mean, he's been awesome, made a lot of really nice saves against the Sharks. And yeah, man, he was awesome in the game that they lost in overtime right before that as well. Kind of a hard luck loser in that. So Igor, man, he's not a concern for me. I think he's going to be just fine. And the Igor that we've gotten in the last 3 Ranger games, 2 of which were wins, that's the Igor that we all know and love and that we saw all season last year.
Are you concerned at all about Jaroslav Halak? I mean, he hasn't always gotten a lot of support defensively from his team, but he's still winless at this point.
I'm actually not. As far as backup goalies are concerned, I think he's fine. To kind of use an analogy and borrow something from a different sport, like in baseball, if you have a starting pitcher and he gets lit up once or twice early at the start of the season, I mean, his ERA is going to go right through the roof, and it's going to take a while to come back down. For Jaroslav Halak, I know the numbers aren't really that impressive, but he had a really bad start against Columbus where he was not good at all. Besides that, though, the way I look at it, I kind of just divide it into like, okay, he started 5 games. How has he done in all of them? Well, he was really bad against Columbus. He was so-so against your Islanders. The other 3 games that he started, he's been good to very good. And I think for a backup goalie, you'll take that. And I think eventually it'll round back into form. His most recent start, I think it was the most recent one, they lost in overtime. And I mean, he smashed his stick against the crossbar. You could tell he really wanted to win that game, really wanted to get a win for his team, and just wasn't able to do so. But he's actually played a lot better than I think the stats would suggest. And like I said, that one game against Columbus, that's kind of why his numbers are not so good right now. But I think it'll eventually turn.
The times that we've spoken in our crossover episodes and when we've had you here, we've always talked about the young players on this team and how important their development is. We're reaching the quarter pole of the season. Where are the young stars and how is their development coming?
Yeah, I mean, I figure, that there's a few that we could go to here, but the 2 that everybody always asks about, they always want to know, how are they doing? What's going on? What are they playing on the right line combinations, all this stuff? Obviously, Kakko and Lafreniere. I would say that, obviously, you look at the point totals, they both have just 7 points in 19 games, which is pretty underwhelming. And I do think overall they have to play a little bit better. Kakko hasn't scored a goal. I think it's up to like 14 games now. I do think that they've played better than their stats would suggest. Kakko in particular, he's so good, and he's just kind of learning to do this the past, season or 2 here. He's so good at just maintaining possession in the offensive zone. When he's got the puck, very, very difficult to separate him from that if you're on the opposing team. And I think it took him a while to also kind of figure out, like, nobody's going to be mad at you. If you drive possession in the offensive zone and you hang on to the puck and you are able to keep offensive zone possessions alive, then by all means do it. Use that skill set to your advantage. I thought he looked really good in the Sharks game. Could have easily scored. He had a backhand chance from the slot. The goalie was out of position. A defenseman went down and blocked the shot. So a little bit snake bitten at this time. Again, it's a situation where I think at this point, most Ranger fans would agree. We would have thought that Kakko and Lafreniere would be a little bit further along. I do think that with every passing season, each of those players continues to get a little bit better. But I've talked about this on my show as well. They take baby steps. It's kind of baby steps, and it's a very slow process. And Ranger fans are kind of looking for that hop, skip, and a leap forward from these guys, where it's like, man, now they're premier players in this league. Now they're big time. So hopefully it's coming. I mean, you keep your fingers crossed. They've had kind of a kid line reunion. They've been out there with Filip Chytil. And Chytil off to a really nice start this season. He was injured for a little while, but, finally kind of developing into the player that the Rangers thought that they were getting. And it's crazy because, he's only 22 years old and he's been in the league for like 5 years, which like seems to not even compute. But yeah, Filip Chytil's been really good. And again, that kid line, they gave him a great spark in the playoffs last year, had a great run there. So they have it in them. It's just battling this inconsistency and, hopefully these guys can all reach their potential pretty soon.
We shall see. We all know progress for hockey players is not linear. So, but hopefully for Ranger fans, they'll get there. John, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, so the podcast, I mean, wherever you're listening / watching this podcast right now, obviously you can find Locked On New York Rangers too. It's available on all, audio platforms. It's available on YouTube. And as far as finding me, I'm on Twitter at jchick17. You've also got the show handle on Twitter at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely give us a follow and feel free to come talk to me about Ranger hockey. Always like meeting some new hockey fans.
All right. John Chick, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, Gil, thanks for having me, man.